Hi, this is a demonstration video of how to test version 2.5, how to force trades essentially. So let's have a look at this. We have a Euro, Dollar, GBP, USD ARB set up on here. We can see that in our system data that the system status is active, but the mode is disabled on this time frame. That means that the system cannot trade on the H1 time frame. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my properties in my expert advisor, and in order to push or force trades I'm going to go down to the M5 time frame. I'm going to turn off the M15 time frame, and I'm going to go down to the M5 time frame on the chart as well. So now we can see here we've got a red label on the M5 trade time frame control saying it's active for trading on this chart. I'm just going to shift the STD trace over a little bit. Okay, so now we need to think about what we're trying to do. So let's just say we'll try and force the system to trade off this lower trigger irrespective of what the trend is doing. We need to look at our entry control data now. So let's say we want a touch based entry, so when the spread touches the trigger level we want the system to enter. So we go down to use delayed order entry, turn that to false. Now we've got a trigger touch as our entry method, and now we need to decide whether or not we're going to trend lock or not. At the moment the system is locking long, so let's change that to, we're just going to lock to trend. It's important that you have only one of these locks set to true. So if you lock to trend so it's true, don't set lock long true and lock short true and everything true, because it'll be a disaster. So lock to trend is true, lock long, lock short, false. And now what we're going to do, doesn't really matter if you're just trying to force the system to make trades. The filters aren't terribly important, because if the filters are conflicting, the trend will be stationary anyway. So if you want to force the trend to be stationary, just include one of these long-term stationary trends in the filter selection, because they don't change very often. So go down to include the monthly trend filter, and then the trend will always be stationary until that monthly trend changes to either rising or falling. But providing there's a conflict in these different filtered trends here, the trend will always be stationary. Okay, so now the system by default will only take trades when the reversion potential is positive, i.e. green. So at the moment the reversion target is the upper trigger, but if we're going to force the system to take trades, we'll use the moving average in the middle as the target. So down here I go to reversion target in the STD indicator, and I say target MA is true, you must turn off these other targets. So target UT is false, target LT, upper trigger, lower trigger, false. So now we can see the reversion target is the moving average, which is good, and now you can see the reversion potential has turned negative because the spread is very close to the moving average. Channel value it estimates at $7.93, spread cost is $6. Clearly trying to run ARBs on this time frame is pretty stupid, because the cost of the actual trades pretty much eats up the opportunity, but for testing purposes it doesn't matter. So next thing to do is we need to force the system to take trades when the reversion potential is negative. So we go to properties and we say trade only positive potential, we turn that to false. And now we can start adjusting. Let me just bring the trade screen up so you can see that. You should be able to just about see that on the bottom of the... Okay, right, now what we're going to do is we're going to physically force the system by adjusting the STD multiple right down to, say, 0.1. Okay, now, so we can see that the spread is obviously outside the lower trigger level. What we also need to do is to set the trade excuse me, trade stationary spreads to true as well, because the spread is stationary. Now you can see the system has just opened a long arb, i.e. buying the first pair in the which makes up the spread, i.e. the euro dollar, and selling cable. So that's forced the system to make the trade, and you can see here basically it's updating the profit for both trades, or loss in this case, and also the profit and loss of the open arbs is up here as well, so saying minus $4. This will update slightly. Basically it takes a tick, it'll be about a tick behind the data here. In fact, sorry, I shouldn't say that, that's not correct. The data will be updated here, the P&L data for the ARB will be updated every time an incoming tick comes in on this chart, which in this case is euro dollar. So these figures may not be in sync all the time, depending on how often tick data comes into the euro dollar chart on which this ARB is based. So let's say you want to now close this ARB. So you just decide that you've finished testing, you want to close it. So you close those ARBs. Now the system will by default set an external global variable which you can access by pressing F3, and here we can see this is the global variable table in MT4, and all the ARBs will have a V2.5 prefix. So in this case we're looking for V2.5 euro dollar GBP USD. Here we go. So V2.5 euro dollar GBP USD filled, and it's got a value of 2. That means it was a long order, i.e. buying the first pair, selling the short pair. The system will delete this by default if you change the time frame. So if you go to M15, go back to M5, and that's obviously opened another ARB because we've set our lower trigger levels to be ridiculously small. But let me go back again. It's important to understand how this works. So let's say we then close this ARB again. So I've closed that ARB. I'm now going to set the STD multiple back to a sensible level. I'm going to look at the global variable table again in MT4, and we will see down here we've got V2.5 euro dollar GBP USD filled value 2, meaning a long ARB was placed, the entry time, the level, etc. Now if I change the chart time frame now, then go back to M5, then look at the global variable table again, you can see that the euro dollar GBP filled entry has been removed alongside all the entry data and entry time as well. So the system will scrub the global variable table when you change the time frame automatically, or when a new bar is received on the chart. So you don't need to worry about editing the global variable table, the system will do it for you, but you need to change the time frame. Just toggle the time frame if you manually close a trade in testing. So that's basically how you can force the system to take trades. There are, as you can see, a lot of interdependent variables which you've got to be careful how you've got to understand how the system works so that you can force the system to take these trades. Normally the default settings will not allow you to take trades like this because it's very difficult to make money on this time frame, and generally the trigger levels at one standard or two standard deviations in this case are too close to the moving average to allow a trader to actually make any money. I mean, we can see here that the system's estimating the channel value at about $8 or $9. The spread cost is $6, so it's going to be very hard or very difficult to justify spending $6 to make $9. So you've got an upside of $3 on a typical trade. So this is just for testing. It's not intended to be any form of guide of how to use this tool set to make profitable arbitrades at all. It's just for testing. So when you've finished your testing, you need to make sure you go back and reconfigure the system correctly. So the things that you need to be probably looking at are going back and saying trade only positive potential is true. That's important, I think. Trade stationary spreads and delayed order entry and all that kind of stuff is up to the trader and what they're trying to define with their arb trading strategy. It's important to again emphasize don't have a conflict on these trend locks, so have one set to true only. If you set lock long and lock to trend as true, it'll confuse the system. I probably need to add some error logic in there which will warn traders if they have got multiple locks set. For testing, I wouldn't bother with unilateral trading, leave that alone. Leave profit aggregation on if you want. The default value is $10,000, so it won't become active until you've made $10,000 in profit, which you almost certainly won't if you're going to run 5-minute arbs. So don't worry about that. Close all trades. If you turn that to true, it will close all the V2.5 ordered trades or executed trades on the chart. You must turn it to false after you've used it. It's kind of like an emergency close everything kind of panic button, if you like. So if you've got a lot of stuff opened and you want to quickly close it, you can use this close all trades. Max percentage risk, self-explanatory. Lot sizes, self-explanatory. Keep an eye on the minimum tradable equity. If the system falls below $500, it will stop. It'll go to inactive or passive. Auto profit targeting. If you set that to false, the system will look for that profit on the arb. It will look for $200 in this case. If you leave it to true, the system will basically look to exit at the defined reversion target levels. Send email alerts, self-explanatory. This is just kind of label positions and colors. Execution time frames, massively important. System won't run unless the trade-off time frames are set for the time frame you're on. Now those are confirmed here in the trade time frame controls. A reversion target in the STD indicator, massively important. Probably for testing purposes, just leave the reversion target set at target MA. Make sure, again, same thing with these targets, these reversion targets down here. You cannot have more than one set to true. So same thing for the trend locks. Make sure you just got one. I don't know what would happen actually if you set all of them to true. It's just chosen the last one in the list, the LT, so that's what would happen if you set all of them to true. So you'd end up with the last selection in the list. I guess the same thing would apply with. No, it's just the way that. Yeah, that needs to be. I need to change that in the code to stop people from doing that, because it will probably almost certainly confuse the system. So that is an example of just making sure one reversion target is set to true, one only. That needs to be removed. That reversion to MA there is from the old version 2.5 system, not the 2.5r system. I need to remove that in the next update, so forget that. Calc period is the number of chart bars which the system uses to calculate the spread trace. If you get data errors, you can try and reduce the calc period, and this is just show entry shows the red dot where the arb is opened. System data color is the color of the text here, these whites. So if I can change that to whatever I want, so go to yellow, and see it's all gone to yellow. Not very nice, really. So we put that back to white. Sorry. And what else do we have? Okay, then we've got down here we have at the bottom very important trend filters, and this allows you to select the active filter, which is based on time frame. So we can filter on M5, M15, M30, etc., all the way up to monthly. And if basically the system will look for a confluence of trend on the active time frames, and if you get, say for example, you filter on, in this case we can see that M15, M30, H1 are all rising, and say you were trading on M5 and you wanted to filter on the higher 3 time frames, so you'd set M15, M30 and H1 to true in the STD indicator. Let's do it so I can explain properly. So we go M15 true, M30 true, M60 true, turn off the others, and so now we're locking to trend. So if we also turn trade stationary spreads to false, which is tied in with this trend locking facility, the system will only take trades triggered off this lower trigger here, because it considers the trend is rising. It's telling you there the trend is rising, and the lower trigger would be, as we're locking to the trend, the system will only take trades triggered off that lower dotted yellow line, which means that if we're sensible, we would want to change our reversion target to the upper trigger. So we change reversion to target UT to true, to target MA to false. So now it's saying reversion target is that value, and UT, i.e. upper trigger, and now you can see our reversion potential has swung to positive, because we're going from the dotted yellow line all the way up to the dotted red line, so it's doubled our potential profit from the trade. So if you're trading in trending conditions where the spread is trending, and to be honest it spends a fair amount of time trending, this is an example of really just buying a pullback in this ARB, this spread basically. So if you think about it, you'd be buying a pullback on the euro sterling synthetic pair in a trend where the euro was strengthening against sterling. You know, it's important to point out this is a tool set. You know, just because I've got foreign exchange pairs in here, some people send me clever emails saying, "Oh, you could have done that, mate, trading euro sterling on its own." Yeah, I know that, but you can put anything you want into the system. So you could trade, you know, a foreign exchange with gold, or you know, anything you want, any commodities. You can trade multiple assets. You can trade anything which moves in a highly correlated fashion. So it kind of, you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. So it's just a tool set to allow a trader to automate entry and exit strategies. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a walkthrough of how you can force trades in the system for testing purposes, and allow yourself to become familiar with the system operations. As you can see, there are quite a lot of interdependent variables, so it's very important to get familiar with those before you start to use the system in anger. Okay, thanks very much for watching.